Welcome to Meeple Mentor. I'm Jared and we're about to play Everdell. Let's take a look, I'll show you how. And as I go over everything, feel free to pause the video as needed to follow along with your copy of the game. Check the description for timestamps to the different sections of the tutorial. And make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell below the video so you don't miss any of my latest content. Everdell takes place in a critter-filled world where animals talk, sing, dance, and go to work, write poems, and track their own history. The valley town of Everdell has a centrally located tree known as the Ever Tree. I've made a separate video that covers a lot of detail about the game's fictional universe and the town of Everdell's history. I'll put a link to that in the description below. It's cool to know, but doesn't affect how you play the game. Players will be building their own cities outside of the edges of Everdell by playing cards. Gather resources that you need to attract critters and build buildings in your city by taking worker placement actions. The game plays out over a year, going through 4 seasons of preparation before the game ends. Whoever has built up the most valuable critter city will be the winner. There are several expansions to Everdell that are all worthwhile. I'll cover those separately at the end of the video. First, place the main board face up in the center of the table. Leave room for players to have table space in front of them. Build the Ever Tree and place it on the board at the tree stump at the top. The resources in the game all have a designated area to sit. You should have piles of twigs, resin, pebbles, and berries along the riverbank. The point tokens and occupied tokens can sit in supply piles off the board. Find and shuffle together all the small forest cards. Reveal 3 face up to use this game. They'll sit in these clearings to the sides of the board. Reveal a 4th forest card as well if playing a 4-player game. The forest cards show an icon with a 4, meaning these are only used in 4-player games. These cardboard tiles are the events. Place them near the 4 named locations above the river. The boat tile can sit in the river. Find and shuffle together all the small event cards. Draw 4 and place them face up on the Evertree branches here. The rest of the cards won't be used. Shuffle together all the Everdell main deck cards. The deck should sit under the tree. Now reveal 8 face up to sit in the center of the board called the meadow. Each player should choose a color critter type to be and collect all their workers. Randomly decide on a first player or go by the rulebook, which suggests that the most humble player goes first. Turns will always go clockwise from the first player. Deal the first player a hand of 5 cards. The second player should be dealt 6, the third player 7, and the fourth player 8 cards if there is one. The top of the Evertree shows 3 seasons: spring, summer, and autumn. Each player should place one of their workers under spring and summer and 2 workers under autumn. Everyone should now have 2 workers in front of them with their hand of cards, ready to start the game. In Everdell, players have a strict hand limit of 8 cards. If you should draw cards but you have 8 already, you don't get to draw any. However, all the cards in the meadow are shared by all players. Act as if they're in your hand, but of course they don't count towards your personal hand limit. You'll need to collect resources in order to play most every card in the game. Cards you play get added to your personal city tableau. During the course of the game, you may only have 15 spaces occupied. Each card you play takes up a space, however some cards specify they could share a space with another card or don't count towards your city's limit. It's recommended to lay out your city into 3 rows of 5 card spaces as you start playing cards. The small event cards you may earn or the event tiles don't count towards the city limit. When it's your turn, you can do one action. Either play a card from your hand, play a card from the meadow, place a worker on a worker space, or pass into the next season. As each player moves to another season, they gain more of their workers to use. Once all players have exhausted their possible actions in the final season, the game will be over and you'll count up points. Let's take a look at the different kinds of cards you'll see in the game. There are construction cards and critter cards. You can have multiple copies of all common construction cards and common critter cards in your city. However, you're limited to one copy of each unique construction and unique critter card. The top left area of the card shows the resources required in order to play it. The text at the bottom shows you what the card does when you play it. Anytime you play a card from the meadow, it goes directly from the meadow to your city, never to your hand. After a meadow card is played, immediately replace it with a new card from the top of the draw deck. Lastly, each card shows a card type icon to the left of its name. There are 5 card types you'll see. The tan traveler cards will activate immediately when played and never activates again. The green production cards activate when they're played and again when preparing for spring and autumn seasons. The red destination cards provide new worker action spaces. You may place a worker there to do its action. Additionally, if the card has the open sign on it, then opponents may also have the option to go there and use its ability. The blue governance cards typically give you ongoing benefits for playing certain cards. Finally, the purple prosperity cards provide additional in-game points based on the requirements that are written on the card. As your action during your turn, you may play a card from your hand or from the meadow. The played card gets placed into one of the 15 city spaces within your city tableau in front of you. The cost of playing a card is shown at the top left of the card. Usually critter cards require berries and construction cards require a combination of resin, twigs, and pebbles. The cards played in your city will earn you points at the end of the game. Their point value is shown to the right of the card's name. When the card is paid and played, you gain the benefits shown in the card text. Sometimes the benefits are an ongoing bonus and apply situationally. The rulebook includes an index on pages 17 to 20 of all the construction and critter cards. Check there for details on what the card does should you have any questions. You may be able to play a critter card from your hand or the meadow for free if you have his related construction card already in your city. The construction card will show in the bottom right the name and picture of the critter it can play for free. Likewise, the critter will show what construction it goes to in the upper left of its card. So if you have the construction in your city, place an occupied token over the critter's picture on the card. Then play that critter for no extra cost. Each construction only allows one free critter during the game. So if you've already put an occupied token on it, it can't be used again for playing the free critter. Playing a critter this way is not an extra free action. It takes up one of your actions allowed to you during your turn. From your available workers, you may place one of them on a worker action space to do that action. Any of the critter worker spaces that are fully encircled limit its use to one worker there at a time. The spaces that have an open area at the bottom of the circle are shareable and can have multiple workers there simultaneously. The action spaces along the path here that travels horizontally beside the river are known as the basic action spaces. Some cards reference them directly. The forest cards you place during setup at the sides of the board are known as the forest locations. Typically, these are the most powerful action spaces you'll have available. A player may never have more than one of their own workers on these forest locations at a time. The action spaces picture items, points, or cards for you to gain when taking the action. Take what's shown from the supply and collect it near you for spending later. Cards are always drawn from the top of the draw deck, unless specifically told to draw from the meadow. Going through the basic action spaces, the first gains you 3 twigs. The second gives you 2 twigs and lets you draw 1 card from the deck. At this space, take 2 resin. Here, take 1 resin and draw 1 card. This space lets you draw 2 cards and take 1 victory point token. This one gives you 1 pebble. This action gives you 1 berry and lets you draw a card, and the last one lets you gain 1 berry. Take note which of these spaces are fully encircled and limits them to 1 worker at a time. The Haven is this large shared action space in the corner. Going here lets you discard cards from your hand. For every 2 discarded, you can take 1 of any basic resource. All discarded cards should be placed face down here in front of the board. If the main draw deck ever empties, you may reshuffle the discard pile to make a new draw deck. The events have their own worker space on them to claim them to your city. However, in order to place a worker there, you have to have met the requirement. The event tiles on the board sit next to a card type and a number. You must have played that many cards in your city of the matching icon in order to claim the event tile. When you do, move it with your critter on it to your city. It doesn't take up a city space and will score points at the end of the game. Likewise, the event cards on the Evertree have requirements as well. You must have in your city the named cards written at the top or whatever combination of card types it says. If you do, you may place a worker on the card and claim it to your city. The top portion of the event text describes any additional costs necessary to pay when you claim the card. The bottom area may show additional scoring conditions that happen at the end of the game just for you. Keep the card near your city and it doesn't count towards one of your city spaces. The red destination cards in your city offer more worker action spaces to go. Opponents may also have destination cards that say open on them, meaning you can send a worker there too. If an opponent ever takes the action space of a card you control in your city, the owner of the card gains 1 victory point token from the supply. Autumn is the final season you'll play in the game. Once you have moved into Autumn, you're allowed to place workers on the journey spaces. Only one critter may occupy the 3, 4, and 5 victory point spaces, while any number can sit at the 2-point space. When you go there, you must discard cards from your hand equal to the points beside the space. Don't collect the tokens, as the journey spaces themselves will be scored at the end of the game. The game starts in the winter season, giving everyone only 2 workers. However, you'll remember that at the beginning of the game you set aside 4 more workers on the Evertree under each season. Preparing for season is the action you take to pick up all your played workers among all the action spaces, and gain new workers that are under the next season area of the tree. You can only do this once you've placed all your available workers. The first time you prepare for season, you'll be entering spring. Gain 1 more worker to your supply, and you may activate all your green production cards in your city again. You may activate the production cards in any order you want to maximize their effects. Players will be in different seasons at different times. It's possible for one player to quickly get themselves to autumn while another is finishing up in spring. While it's possible, I don't recommend speeding through like that, as you're probably not playing enough cards to have a chance at winning. When preparing for summer, you'll gain 1 more worker and draw 2 cards from the meadow. Remember that if you get to 8 cards in your hand, you don't get to draw any more at all. Preparing for autumn gives you your final 2 workers and activates all your green production cards 1 more time. The game ends for each player at different times, since players go through each season at their own pace. When in autumn and you can't perform or don't want to do any more actions, you're done. You pass all remaining turns. Because of this, the finished players will keep their workers on their last resting places, potentially blocking action spaces for players still taking turns. The workers won't be picked up until the game is scored. A passed player may not be given any cards or resources. If a player needs to give someone cards or resources but everyone else is passed, they're discarded instead. All unfinished players continue taking turns until everyone has run out of actions or passed. At this point, points can be tallied up to determine the winner. You can jot points down on a piece of paper as you go, or keep a running total in your head. The Pearlbrook Expansion provides a score pad. Several BGG users have uploaded printable scoresheet files on Everdell's Board Game Geek listing online. The link to that is in the video's description. First, count up all the points shown on the cards you played in your city. Then add to that the sum of your collected point tokens. Check for any purple prosperity cards you've played in your city that would earn you in-game points and add those up. From the journey spaces on the main board, add the points next to each of your critters placed. Lastly, add up points earned from event tiles and event cards that you've claimed during the game. Whoever has the most points will win the game. If there's a tie, the player who achieved the most events wins. If still a tie, whoever among them has the most leftover resources will be the winner. The first expansion Starling Games released is called Pearlbrook. It adds quite a few things to the game, including more victory point tokens, cards, 4 new sets of workers, forest and event cards, and a score pad. But that's just the start. When using the Pearlbrook expansion, place the river board to the left of the main board during setup. Place the 2 board overlays on top of the main board near the river events areas. Match up the art as much as possible. Remove the 4 event tiles from the base game. Instead, place the 3D wonders out on the board above the named locations on the wonder overlays. Give each player a Frog Ambassador worker matching their critter color. Shuffle the new adornment cards and deal 2 to each player. The adornments do not count against the card hand limit or city spaces. Create a supply pile of pearls above the river shoal space. Create 2 decks of cards from the new river cards. One deck will be citizens and one for locations. Shuffle each separately and set aside 2 from each deck face down. Shuffle these 4 cards together and place them face down randomly at these 4 river action space areas. Now add 1 pearl on top of each river card. The remaining river cards won't be used. Shuffle in the Pearlbrook main cards to the main deck before dealing players their starting hands. The Pearlbrook Expansion cards have this river icon on them. Make sure that at least 1 Pearlbrook event card comes out as one of the 4 events in play. While playing the Pearlbrook Expansion, you start the game with a Frog Ambassador. The Frog Worker may only be placed on worker spaces with the frog footprint icon. When preparing for a season, you also pick up your Frog Ambassador. The shoal space at the top is a shared space and lets you pay any 2 resources and discard 2 cards to gain 1 pearl. The river destination card spaces have a minimum requirement before you're allowed to play your frog there. You must have the minimum number of cards played in your city matching the icon to go to the associated space. The first player to go to each one gains the pearl sitting on top of the card. Then the card is flipped over and they may attempt to complete the action. Usually the card requires you to discard certain cards or point tokens collected to gain pearls and other rewards. Once a card is flipped, it stays face up for the rest of the game. No more free pearls are added to them. Pearls are worth 2 points each at the end of the game and are also used to pay for the 3D wonders. The costs of each wonder is shown above its action space. Once a wonder is earned, it sits at that player's city to score at the end of the game. They do not take up a city space. Each wonder scores points as shown on them, with the Starfall's Flame being worth the most at 25 points. You may build more than 1 wonder in your city. The small adornment cards dealt to you at the beginning of the game are additional cards you can play during your turn as your action. The cost to play each one is 1 pearl. After playing it, the top half of the card resolves immediately. The bottom half shows how many points it will score at the end of the game. Those are all the added components and rules for Pearlbrook. Its rulebook also includes its own index on page 7 to clarify the abilities of the new cards. The next 2 expansions came out at the same time from one Kickstarter in 2019. The first one I'll cover is Spirecrest. Spirecrest brings a new board, large rideable critters, a new critter color to be, a rabbit traveler meeple, and much more. It expands the journey idea from the base game and makes it a full expedition, bringing discovery and weather cards. Spirecrest brings a bit more complexity to the game, so if you use this expansion, it's recommended not to include other expansions with it. To set up, add the mountain board at the bottom of the main board. Separate the weather cards into the different seasons. Shuffle each stack and place 1 from each season face down on the board. Winter here, spring here, summer, and autumn. The rest of the weather cards won't be used. Separate and shuffle the discovery cards by their 3 categories. They'll also sit face down on the mountain board. Here for the foothills, here for the peaks, and here for the ridge. Each player starts with an Everdell Expedition map tile. Shuffle the extra map tiles and place them face up on the foothills area of the trail. Place 1 more than the number of players. Then place the same number of map tiles face down on the Peaks Trail and the Ridge Trail. The rest of the tiles won't be used. These are the big critter meeples. You can arrange them somewhere on the mountain board or nearby it. Flip over the winter weather card and place 1 rabbit traveler meeple from each player's color on the foothills icon at the beginning of the trail. The weather card corresponding to the area of the trail your traveler is in will affect you as long as you're there. You must follow any rule restrictions written. Whenever you prepare for the next season during the game, you'll also do the explore action afterwards. This is done in 3 steps: chart, discover, and travel. To chart, first take 1 map tile from the trail your traveler is at. The map is added to your expedition tile to the right, which will slowly become its own path. You'll end up gaining 3 map tiles over the course of the game. To discover, reveal 3 discovery cards from the area your traveler is in. Place them face up beneath the cost markers at the bottom of the board. The first card location is free. The second will cost 1 discarded card or pay any 1 resource. The card in the third location costs either 2 cards or 2 resources. You may also discard 1 card and 1 resource. Play 1 of these into your area. It won't take up a city space. The 2 you didn't choose will go face down on the bottom of its deck. Then move your traveler to the next trail area. If not already revealed, flip up the weather card and the map tiles for the new area. As soon as moving your traveler to the new area, the new weather card will be the one in effect for you. When you prepare for season into autumn, your traveler will move to your expedition tile in front of you. The autumn weather card will affect you while your traveler is on the expedition. At the end of the game, once you pass, your traveler embarks on his expedition. Each of the map tiles will provide you victory points, but you must pay the cost to travel there before earning them. Travel to the map tiles from left to right, paying all costs if you can. You'll only gain points for map tiles your traveler made it to by paying the cost shown at the bottom of each. The rules provide an index of each weather card and discovery card on pages 7 to 10. Bellfaire is the third expansion to Everdell and adds a new board that replaces the Evertree. It's full of modular additions like rules for a 5 or 6 player game, player boards, new in-game Garland awards, and more. It also brings 2 new critter types players could be, cardinals and toads. Since the Bellfaire expansion adds several modules, you can combine it with other expansions easily. Simply choose which modules you'll be using before starting the game. If you don't want to use the Evertree because of limited board visibility, just remove it and place the new Bellfaire board at the top of the main board. It includes location spaces built into it for 3 of its own modules. Without using the board, just use the module's tiles by placing them beside the game board. The first addition in Bellfaire is the player boards. Each player may choose to use these to help organize their city grid. You may store your available workers, resources, and point tokens on it. The expansion adds some new forest location cards. Shuffle them in with the deck of the rest of the forest locations before drawing them. There are new special event cards too, which can be added in several ways. You can shuffle them all together during setup, shuffle and draw 2 Bellfaire events and 2 base game events, or only use the Bellfaire special events. The Flower Festival event is a new type of event tile you can claim during the game. To earn it, you must have 1 of each of the 5 card colors in your city, then claim it by placing a worker on it. It's worth 4 points at the end of the game. New Garland awards are now available and represent the king and queen recognizing cities of excellence. During setup, shuffle the awards and place 1 face up near the board, or at the center of the Bellfaire board. Whoever has the most cards in their city matching the type shown on the garland gains 6 points. Second place gains 3 points. Tied players will both gain the points. You must have at least 1 of the card types shown to be eligible to win the award. The Bellfaire market board can be added by placing the tile next to the board or by using it on the Bellfaire board. During setup, place the 4 market tokens on the gain side of the market. When placing a worker, you decide to gain resources or trade them. To gain resources, choose 1 of the available tokens, gain its resources and cards shown, then move the tokens down to the trade side of the market. If you choose to trade, you may pay the resources and discard the card shown on the token while it's in the trade area of the market. Then gain 3 point tokens and any 2 resources from the supply. Move the market token back to gain side. Only 1 of your workers can be here at a time, but other players may also occupy it and take the action. Bellfaire also brings variable player powers to the game. During setup, deal 2 player power cards to each player and choose 1 to use. Depending on the critter chosen, you gain the critter power card and the matching critters and its color. When preparing for spring, do not gain a worker while using the player powers module. The rulebook includes an outline of each power on page 6 and 7. Lastly, it's now possible to play Everdell with up to 5 or 6 players, with some rule changes. First, you won't gain a worker when preparing for spring. Play with 5 special events with 5 players and 6 special events with 6 players. The new hand limit is 7 instead of 8. To start the game, deal out the following starting cards. 5 cards to the first 2 players, 6 cards to players 3 and 4 in line, and 7 cards to the last 2 players to go. When passing at the end of the game, discard your hand. The draw pile will be refreshed with the discards. If there are no cards in the deck or the discard pile, draw from the meadow. Then if out of cards from the meadow, no one may draw cards until more cards are discarded, creating a new draw pile. Keep the rulebook handy and check BoardGameGeek.com for FAQs and extra content. Check the video description for links to Top Shelf Gamer for token upgrades and SleeveKings.com for a 10% off coupon on card sleeves. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you found this teaching helpful. Stick around to watch another Learn to Play video. And remember, teach when you can, but always be learning. See you next time.